The imperial palace of Scorathia gleamed like a mountain of polished obsidian under the twin suns. Its towers stretched toward the crimson sky, each one carved from volcanic rock and adorned with precious metals that had been mined from the planet's core over thousands of years. Inside the throne room, Emperor Kevith paced back and forth, his massive scaled form creating thunderous echoes with each step. His wings, normally kept folded against his back in a display of composure, twitched with barely contained anxiety. The assembled council of dragon lords watched their emperor with growing concern. Never in the 3,000 years of Kevith's reign had they seen him display such visible distress. "Another healer has failed," announced High Counselor Vraxis, her silver scales dulling with sorrow. "The prince grows weaker by the day. Our best physicians cannot identify the illness that plagues him." Kevith's golden eyes blazed with frustration. His son, Prince Arion, lay dying in the medical wing, and the greatest minds in the Scorathian Empire could do nothing to save him. The prince was only 60 years old, barely more than a child by dragon standards, and he possessed a brilliant mind that had already contributed innovations to their society. The thought of losing him was unbearable. "We have exhausted every resource within our empire," Vraxis continued. "Every healer, every ancient remedy, every technological advancement we possess. The sickness defies all our understanding. It attacks his essence, his very life force, in ways our instruments cannot measure." "Then we must look beyond our empire," Kevith declared, his voice resonating through the chamber like rolling thunder. "Send word to every allied species. I will pay any price, grant any favor, to anyone who can save my son." The council members exchanged uncertain glances. The dragons were proud, ancient, and powerful. They had rarely needed to seek help from other species. But the Emperor's word was law, and within hours messages were dispatched across the known galaxy. Weeks passed with no promising responses. Species after species sent their regrets, their healers, their apologies. None could help. The prince continued to fade, spending most of his days in a twilight state between waking and sleep, his once vibrant emerald scales growing dull and lifeless. Then, on a day when hope seemed all but extinguished, a small transport vessel requested permission to land. It bore the insignia of the Terran Federation, one of the youngest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy. The dragons knew of humans, of course. They were the curious bipeds who had only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 generations ago, a species still finding its place among the ancient powers of the galaxy. The human who stepped off the transport was unremarkable by dragon standards. She stood barely 2 meters tall, with dark hair pulled back from her face, and wearing the simple uniform of a Terran medical officer. Her name was Dr. Keiko Chen, and she carried only a small case of equipment. She stood in the landing bay, dwarfed by the massive dragon guards who escorted her to the throne room, showing no fear despite being surrounded by beings who could incinerate her with a breath. "You are the human physician?" Kevith asked, his tone skeptical. He had agreed to see her only because every other option had failed, but he found it hard to believe this tiny creature could succeed where his own brilliant healers had not. "I am, Your Imperial Majesty," Keiko replied, bowing respectfully. "I received your call for help. I cannot promise success, but I can promise I will do everything in my power to help your son." "Our greatest minds have failed," Vraxis interjected. "What makes you believe you can succeed?" Keiko met the High Counselor's gaze steadily. "Because I approach healing differently than you do. Your medical reports, which you shared in your distress call, show that you've focused on treating the prince with energy manipulation, essence restoration, and bioharmonic resonance. These are sophisticated techniques, far beyond human capabilities. But sometimes the answer lies not in complexity, but in simplicity." Kevith felt a flicker of something he had not experienced in weeks. Hope. Perhaps this human's different perspective was exactly what they needed. "You may see my son," he decreed. High Counselor Vraxis will escort you and provide whatever you require. The medical wing was a marvel of dragon engineering, filled with crystalline diagnostic equipment that hummed with power and devices that could manipulate biological energy at the molecular level. But all of this technology had proven useless. Prince Arion lay on a platform designed to support his dragon form, which even in his youth was already 10 meters long from snout to tail. His breathing was shallow, his scales had lost their luster, and his eyes remained closed. Keiko approached slowly, setting down her case. The dragon physicians who had been tending to the prince watched her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She pulled out a simple, handheld scanner, far more primitive than the equipment surrounding them, and began taking readings. Then she did something that surprised everyone present. She reached out and gently placed her hand on the prince's scaled foreleg. "What are you doing?" demanded one of the dragon physicians. "Physical contact could disrupt his energy field. Or it could provide comfort," Keiko replied calmly, not removing her hand. "Tell me, when did the prince first show symptoms?" "Approximately 4 months ago," Vraxis answered. "He experienced sudden fatigue, loss of appetite, and progressive weakness. The decline has been steady and irreversible, despite all our interventions." Keiko continued her examination, using her simple tools and, surprisingly, her own senses. She studied the prince's breathing, examined his scales closely, and even requested samples of the food and water he had consumed. The dragon physicians watched in bewilderment as this human conducted what seemed like a primitive, almost medieval examination. "Your Highness," Keiko said softly, speaking directly to the unconscious prince, "I'm going to help you, I promise." Her hand remained on his scales, a gesture of comfort that seemed almost absurdly inadequate, given the sophistication of everything else in the room. After hours of examination and study, Keiko requested a meeting with the Emperor and his council. They gathered in a smaller chamber, all eyes fixed on the human physician who seemed impossibly small among the assembled dragons. "I believe I know what's wrong with Prince Arion," Keiko announced, "but my diagnosis will sound absurd to you." "Speak freely," Kavith commanded. "At this point, no theory is too absurd to consider." "Your son is suffering from what humans would call heavy metal poisoning," Keiko explained. "Specifically, an accumulation of certain minerals that are benign to your species in small amounts, but become toxic in concentration." The dragon physicians erupted in protest. "Impossible," one declared. "We have scanned for every known toxin. Our instruments would have detected any harmful substances." "Your instruments scan for toxins known to harm dragons," Keiko countered, "but they're calibrated to your normal physiology. Prince Arion's metabolism appears to be slightly different from the typical dragon baseline. What your instruments read as normal background levels are actually accumulating in his system to toxic concentrations. It's so subtle that your sophisticated equipment dismisses it as normal variation." She pulled up her own scans on a display unit. "Look here. These trace elements show a pattern. They're concentrating in specific organs, disrupting cellular function at a level your bioharmonic scanners wouldn't detect because they're looking for energy disruptions, not simple chemical imbalances." Vraxis studied the data, her expression thoughtful. "Even if you are correct, how would you treat this? Our standard detoxification protocols have been applied. Those protocols are designed for acute poisoning, not chronic accumulation," Keiko explained. "What the prince needs is a gentle, sustained treatment that slowly removes the toxins while supporting his body's natural healing processes. It will take time and patience." "How much time?" Kavith asked, his voice tight with emotion. "Weeks, possibly months," Keiko admitted, "but I believe he can fully recover." The Emperor made his decision in an instant. "You will begin treatment immediately. Whatever you need, you shall have. If you save my son, Dr. Chen, you will have the eternal gratitude of the Skorathian Empire." Keiko bowed. "I don't need gratitude, Your Majesty. I became a doctor to heal. That is reward enough." Over the following days, Keiko implemented her treatment plan. It was shockingly simple compared to the complex procedures the dragon physicians had attempted. She introduced a carefully formulated chelation therapy, using compounds that would bind to the toxic metals and allow them to be eliminated from the prince's system. She adjusted his diet, eliminating certain foods that were contributing to the problem. And perhaps most importantly, she spent time with him. Even though Arion remained largely unconscious, Keiko talked to him during her examinations. She told him about Earth, about human medicine, about her own journey from a small clinic in Tokyo to practicing medicine among the stars. The dragon physicians found this behavior peculiar, but they noticed something interesting. When Keiko was present and speaking to him, the prince's vital signs stabilized. His breathing became more regular. Some spark of life seemed to return to him. "The human has an unusual approach," one physician admitted to Vraxis. "But the prince is responding. Not dramatically, but the decline has stopped. He is stable for the first time in months." Vraxis observed Keiko as she worked, noting the care and attention the human gave to every detail, no matter how small. She adjusted the prince's position to prevent pressure sores. She ensured the lighting in his room was optimal for rest. She monitored his temperature and comfort constantly. These were things the dragon physicians had overlooked, considering them insignificant compared to the grand technological interventions they had attempted. "Tell me, Dr. Chen," Vraxis asked one evening, "why did you choose to answer our call? You must have known the odds of success were small, and the risk of failure in the eyes of an empire was significant." Keiko looked up from her work, surprise evident on her face. "A patient needed help. That's all the reason I needed." "But you are human," Vraxis pressed. "We are not your people. Prince Arion is not your concern." "He's a living being who is suffering," Keiko replied simply. "That makes him my concern. That's what being a doctor means. At least, that's what it means to humans. We have a saying in medicine: every patient deserves our best effort, regardless of who they are." Vraxis found herself deeply moved by this philosophy. The dragons were an ancient and powerful species, and perhaps in their power, they had forgotten some simple truths. Perhaps they had become so focused on sophisticated solutions that they had overlooked basic compassion and care. This human, with her primitive tools and simple kindness, was demonstrating something the dragons had lost. As the second week of treatment progressed, the change in Prince Arion became undeniable. Color began returning to his scales, shifting from dull gray-green back toward their natural, vibrant emerald. His breathing deepened and strengthened. And then, on the 14th day of treatment, his eyes opened. The first thing Arion saw was the human. Keiko was adjusting his IV line, her movements careful and practiced. She noticed him stirring and immediately moved closer, her face breaking into a warm smile. "Welcome back, Your Highness," she said softly. "You've been asleep for a while. Don't try to move too quickly. Your body is still healing." Arion's voice came out as a raspy whisper. "Who are you?" "My name is Dr. Keiko Chen. I'm a human physician. Your father brought me here to help you." She reached for a container of water, modified with a long spout so the prince could drink in his current position. "Here, small sips. Your throat will be dry." As Arion drank, his mind began clearing. He remembered falling ill, remembered the parade of healers and physicians, remembered the fear in his father's eyes. And then, darkness. Weeks of darkness punctuated by strange dreams and distant voices. But one voice had been constant, a gentle presence in the darkness, telling him stories and encouraging him to hold on. "It was you," he whispered. "In the darkness, you were there." Keiko nodded. "I've been here every day. You're going to be fine, Prince Arion. The worst is behind you now." News of the prince's awakening spread through the palace like wildfire. Within minutes, Emperor Keveth burst into the medical wing, his massive form moving with surprising speed. He stopped at the entrance to his son's room, his golden eyes widening at the sight of Arian, awake and alert. "My son," Keveth breathed, his voice choked with emotion. "Father," Arian replied, managing a weak smile. "I'm told this human saved my life." Keveth turned to Keiko, and for the first time in his long life, the Emperor of the Scarathian Empire found himself at a loss for words. This small human, this member of a young and unremarkable species, had accomplished what all his power and resources could not. She had saved his son. "Dr. Chen," Kaveth finally managed, "words cannot express my gratitude. You have given me back my son, my heir, my world. Name your reward and it shall be yours. Wealth, territory, technology, anything within my power to grant." Keiko shook her head gently. "Your Majesty, I told you before, I need no reward. Seeing Prince Arion awake and recovering is all the payment I require. However," she added, "there is something I would like to discuss with you, not as payment, but as an opportunity." "Speak," Kaveth commanded, intrigued. "The prince is awake, but he needs continued treatment for several more weeks. With your permission, I would like to remain and complete his care. But more than that, I would like to propose an exchange program between human and dragon medical practitioners. We have much to learn from each other. Your technology is far beyond ours, but perhaps our different perspectives could complement your advanced techniques." The Emperor considered this proposition. Pride warred with pragmatism in his mind, but the sight of his recovered son made the decision easy. "I agree to your proposal, Dr. Chen. You will remain as my son's physician for as long as needed, and I will send a delegation to the Terran Federation to begin establishing this medical exchange program. Perhaps it is time the Scarathian Empire learned that wisdom can come from unexpected sources." Over the following weeks, Arion continued to improve under Keiko's care. But something unexpected began to develop between the human doctor and the dragon prince. Despite the vast differences in their species, biology, and cultures, they found common ground in their curiosity about the universe and their desire to help others. Arion had always been the intellectual among his kind, more interested in science and philosophy than in displays of power. Keiko recognized in him a kindred spirit, someone who valued knowledge and compassion above conquest and glory. They spent long hours talking as Arion recovered. He asked her countless questions about Earth, about human civilization, about how her species had overcome their own conflicts to reach for the stars. She, in turn, learned about dragon culture, their long history, and the weight of expectations that rested on Arion's shoulders as heir to an ancient empire. "Do you ever feel trapped by duty?" Arion asked one evening, his tone contemplative. "You mentioned you trained for over a decade to become a physician. Did you ever want to do something else?" Keiko smiled, considering the question. "Sometimes I wondered what my life would have been like if I'd chosen differently, but ultimately I chose medicine because it felt right. It was what I was meant to do. Do you feel trapped by being heir to the Empire?" "Sometimes," Arion admitted. "My father is a great emperor, strong and decisive. Those are the qualities expected of dragon rulers. But I'm different. I prefer solving problems through innovation rather than force. I want to build bridges between species, not enforce our dominance over them. Sometimes I wonder if I'm fit to rule." "You're going to be a great emperor," Keiko said with conviction. "Maybe even greater than your father. Because you understand that true strength isn't just about power, it's about wisdom, compassion, and the courage to change when change is needed." Their conversations continued, deepening their mutual respect and understanding. The dragon physicians noticed the change in their prince. He wasn't just physically healthier, he seemed more purposeful, more engaged with life. And they understood that this was partly due to the human physician who had become not just his healer, but his friend. As the fourth week of treatment approached, Kavith summoned Keiko to his private chambers. The Emperor looked different than he had when they first met. The desperation and fear were gone, replaced by a calm confidence in something that might have been respect. "Dr. Chen," Kavith began, "my son tells me you plan to return to your duties with the Terran Federation soon." "Yes, Your Majesty," Keiko confirmed. "Prince Arian's recovery is progressing well. He'll need monitoring for a few more months, but your own physicians can handle that now. I've prepared detailed protocols for them to follow." "My son has also told me that you have had a profound impact on his thinking," Kavith continued. "He speaks of new ideas for governing, for building stronger alliances with other species, for using our empire's power to create rather than simply to dominate. These are your influences, are they not?" Keiko chose her words carefully. "Prince Arian already had these ideas within him, Your Majesty. I simply provided an outside perspective that helped him articulate what he already believed. He will be a remarkable leader, but that's because of who he is, not because of anything I've done." Kavith studied the human for a long moment. "You are either very wise or very modest, Dr. Chen, perhaps both. I want you to know that what you have done for my son, for my family, for my empire, will not be forgotten. The Scorathian Empire will consider humanity as honored friends. Any human who comes to our worlds will be welcomed with the respect due to valued allies." "That is very generous, Your Majesty," Keiko said, genuinely moved. "I hope this is the beginning of a long and beneficial friendship between our peoples." "As do I," Kavith agreed. "But there is something else. My son has asked if you might be willing to stay longer, or to return regularly as his personal physician. He trusts you, Dr. Chen, and more than that, he values your counsel. As do I." Keiko felt torn. Part of her wanted to stay, to continue her friendship with Arian, and to witness the changes he would bring to Dragon Society. But she also had responsibilities back home, other patients who needed her, and a life of her own to live. "I cannot stay permanently, Your Majesty," she said finally, "but I would be honored to return regularly to check on Prince Arian's health and to continue our medical exchange program. Perhaps every few months, if my duties permit." "That would be acceptable," Kavith said, and there was warmth in his voice that few outside his family ever heard. "You have taught us much, Dr. Chen, not just about medicine, but about what it means to care for others, regardless of differences. Perhaps we dragons have become so focused on our own greatness that we forgot the simple power of compassion. You have reminded us of something important." The final week of Keiko's initial stay passed quickly. Prince Arian was now well enough to leave his bed and walk through the palace gardens, though he still tired easily. On her last evening, Keiko and Arian sat together by a fountain that glowed with bioluminescent organisms, watching the twin suns set over the volcanic mountains in the distance. "I don't know how to thank you," Arian said quietly. "You saved my life, but you also gave me hope for a different kind of future. Before I fell ill, I felt trapped between my duty and my dreams. Now I see that they don't have to be in conflict. I can honor my responsibilities while still working toward the changes I believe are necessary." "You always had that strength in you," Keiko replied. "I just helped you see it." "Will you really come back?" Arian asked, and there was vulnerability in his voice. "Or is that just a polite thing humans say?" Keiko laughed softly. "I'll come back, I promise. Besides, I need to make sure you're following your treatment protocols. Patients who think they're recovered often neglect the boring maintenance work." "I will be a model patient," Arian said with mock solemnity. "I have no wish to disappoint my physician." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two beings from vastly different worlds who had found an unexpected connection through adversity and healing. Around them, the palace glowed with life and light, and somewhere in the halls, preparations were being made for celebrating the prince's recovery. "You know," Arian said thoughtfully, "humans are remarkable. Your species is so young, so fragile by galactic standards. You lack our strength, our longevity, our advanced technology. Yet you possess something that many ancient races have lost, the ability to see each individual life as precious, regardless of species or status. That's a kind of power all its own. Humanity has its flaws, Keiko said honestly. We're still learning, still making mistakes, but we try to do better. We try to care. Maybe that's what being human really means, continually striving to be better than we were yesterday, and extending kindness even when it's difficult. Then I hope the Scorathian Empire can learn to be a little more human, Arian said, and there was no irony in his words, only genuine respect. The next morning, as Keiko prepared to board her transport, the entire royal family was present to see her off. Emperor Kavith presented her with a medallion of honor, making her an official friend of the empire. Vraxis and the other council members bowed to her, a gesture of respect that shocked everyone present. Dragons did not bow to other species, but they bowed to Keiko. Prince Arian was the last to say goodbye. He stood tall and strong, his emerald scales gleaming in the morning light, looking nothing like the dying patient she had first encountered. "Until we meet again, Dr. Chen," he said formally. Then more quietly he added, "Thank you for everything. You'll always have a home here." As her transport lifted off, Keiko looked back at the palace, at the dragons who had become so much more than just patients or alien beings to her. She had come to this world expecting to provide medical care and nothing more. Instead, she had found herself part of something larger, a bridge between species, a catalyst for change, and proof that compassion and understanding could transcend even the vast differences between humans and dragons. The journey back to Federation space took several days, giving Keiko time to complete her medical reports and reflect on her experience. She documented everything meticulously, knowing that her findings would be studied by human and dragon physicians alike. But some things couldn't be captured in medical journals. The friendships she had found, the lives she had touched, and the hope she had witnessed in a prince's eyes as he found his path forward. When she finally arrived back at the Federation Medical Station, where she was based, her colleagues peppered her with questions. They wanted to know about dragon physiology, about the palace, about the treatment protocols she had developed. She answered patiently, sharing her knowledge freely, but she kept certain moments to herself. The quiet conversations in the medical wing, the trust that had developed between species, and the promise she had made to return. 3 months later, true to her word, Keiko returned to Scorathia for a follow-up visit. She was greeted like returning family. Prince Arion was fully recovered, vibrant and energetic, already implementing some of his new ideas for governance. He had established a council specifically focused on interspecies cooperation, and he had personally overseen the setup of the medical exchange program Keiko had proposed. "Look at this," Arion said excitedly, showing her through the new medical facility that had been built. "We have both human and dragon physicians working side by side. They're learning from each other, developing hybrid techniques that combine our advanced technology with human insight into patient care. It's exactly what you envision." The facility was impressive, a perfect blend of dragon engineering and human medical philosophy. Patients of various species were being treated, each receiving care that was both technologically advanced and deeply compassionate. The dragon physicians who had once been skeptical of Keiko's simple methods were now her most enthusiastic students. "You've created something wonderful here," Keiko said, genuinely amazed. "This is going to change medicine across the galaxy." "We created it together," Arian corrected. "You planted the seeds. I just helped them grow." Over the years that followed, Keiko made regular trips to Scorathia. Each time she returned, she witnessed more changes. The Dragon Empire was transforming, slowly but surely, into something new. They retained their strength and their proud history, but they began to embrace a new philosophy, that true power came not from domination, but from cooperation. not from conquest, but from compassion. Arion became known throughout the empire as the Reformer Prince, the heir who would bring a new era to dragon civilization. He often spoke publicly about the human physician who had saved not just his life, but his vision for the future. Statues were erected commemorating the moment when a small human had taught an ancient empire the value of simple kindness. For Keiko, these visits became some of the most meaningful experiences of her life. She continued her regular work with the Federation, treating patients of all species, but her connection to Skorathia and its people remained special. She trained numerous human physicians in the techniques she had developed for treating non-human patients, emphasizing that good medicine required both technical skill and genuine empathy. The medical exchange program grew beyond anyone's initial expectations. Within a decade, joint human-dragon medical teams were operating throughout the galaxy, bringing advanced care to species and worlds that had never had access to such resources. The collaboration proved so successful that other ancient civilizations began reaching out, wanting to learn from this unlikely partnership. Emperor Kavith, in his official capacity, addressed the Galactic Council and spoke about the lessons his empire had learned. "We dragons have long prided ourselves on our strength and our ancient wisdom," he said. "But a young human physician taught us that there is wisdom in youth, strength in gentleness, and power in caring for even the smallest life. The Skorathian Empire is better for having known humanity, and I believe the galaxy is better when we learn from each other." On what would be Keiko's 10th annual visit to Skorathia, now an established tradition, she found Prince Arion waiting for her at the landing pad as always. But this time something was different. He wore the golden circlet of an emperor. Kavith had abdicated, believing his son was ready to lead the empire into its new era. "Emperor Arion," Keiko said, bowing formally. "None of that," Arion said, pulling her into an embrace that was careful not to crush his fragile human friend. "Your family, Keiko. You always will be." They walked together through the palace gardens, which had been expanded to include plants from dozens of worlds, including a section of cherry trees from Earth that bloomed pink under Skorathia's crimson sky. "I've been thinking," Arion said, "about that first conversation we had, when I was barely conscious and you told me about the Hippocratic Oath, the ancient human promise to do no harm and to heal whenever possible. That simple idea has spread throughout the empire now. Our military academies teach it alongside combat training. Our diplomats invoke it in negotiations. You brought us more than medicine, Keiko. You brought us a philosophy." "Humans didn't invent compassion," Keiko replied. "We just never forgot its importance. Maybe because we're young enough to remember when we needed it ourselves. You dragons had it in you all along. Sometimes you just need someone from outside to help you remember who you truly are." As they sat beneath the cherry trees, watching petals fall like snow, Keiko reflected on the journey that had begun with a desperate call for help and had transformed into something neither species could have imagined. She had come to Skorathia expecting to treat one patient and then leave. Instead, she had helped heal an entire civilization. The story of the Dragon Emperor's sick heir and the human physician who saved him became legend throughout the galaxy. It was told in 1,000 variations across 100 worlds, but the core truth remained the same. Sometimes the greatest power in the universe is not technology or strength, but the simple willingness of one being to care for another, to extend kindness across the vast gulfs of difference that separate species and cultures. Years continued to pass, and Keiko eventually retired from active practice, though she remained a consultant and teacher. She trained generations of physicians in the art and science of interspecies medicine, always emphasizing that technical knowledge meant nothing without compassion. Her students went on to save countless lives across the galaxy, each carrying forward the lessons she had taught them. Emperor Arion ruled the Skorathian Empire with wisdom and grace, transforming it into a force for cooperation rather than domination. He never forgot the human physician who had sat with him in his darkest hours, who had seen him not as a prince or an heir, but simply as a patient who needed care. He ensured that every young dragon learned about the importance of empathy and the strength that comes from admitting when you need help. The medical facility on Skorathia grew into a galactic medical university, where students from every known species came to learn from each other. It stood as a monument to what could be achieved when beings chose to focus on their commonalities rather than their differences, when they valued life in all its forms, and when they remembered that healing requires not just knowledge, but love. On the 50th anniversary of Prince Arion's recovery, now long after Keiko had passed away from old age, as humans inevitably did, a memorial was unveiled in the palace gardens. It showed a small human woman with her hand resting gently on the scaled foreleg of a young dragon prince, capturing the moment when hope had returned to Skorathia. The inscription beneath read simply, "She taught us that strength is nothing without compassion, knowledge is nothing without wisdom, and power is nothing without kindness. In remembering her, we remember what we can be." Emperor Arion, now ancient even by dragon standards, stood before the memorial with tears in his golden eyes. Around him stood hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all of whom had been touched by the legacy Keiko had created. Human physicians worked alongside dragon healers, treating patients without regard for species or status, each one carrying forward the simple truth that every life deserves care and dignity. "She would have said she was just doing her job," Arion told the assembled crowd. "She would have insisted that she was nothing special, that any decent physician would have done the same. But that was what made her extraordinary. She truly believed that caring for others was simply what one did, not something deserving of special recognition. She taught me, taught all of us, that the most radical act in the universe is to look at a being completely different from yourself and decide that their suffering matters to you, that their life has value, that they deserve your best effort to help them, simply because they exist." The crowd was silent, absorbing his words. Then, in a gesture unprecedented in galactic history, every being present bowed their heads in honor of the human physician who had changed their universe. Dragons and humans, ancient species and young ones, all united in recognition of a simple truth, that the measure of a civilization is not in its technology or its power, but in how it cares for the vulnerable, the sick, and those in need. As the twin suns set over Skorathia, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the memorial stood silent watch over the gardens. Cherry blossoms drifted on the breeze, carried from Earth across the stars, a reminder that even the smallest gestures of beauty and kindness can transform worlds. Keiko Chen had come to an alien world armed with nothing but her knowledge, her compassion, and her determination to heal. She had faced an impossible challenge, doubts from all sides, and the weight of an empire's expectations. But she had never wavered from her core belief that every patient deserves care, every life has value, and that the simple act of reaching out to help another being is what makes us worthy of calling ourselves civilized. In the end, she had found hope in her ability to heal, and a dying prince had found hope in her arms. But the real miracle was what grew from that moment, a friendship that transcended species, an empire transformed by compassion, and a galaxy reminded that the most powerful force in the universe is not conquest or technology, but the simple human act of caring for another living soul. And so the story passed into legend, told to children of every species as they learned about medicine, about history, and about what it means to be truly civilized. The Dragon Emperor's sick heir had found hope in a human's arms, and in doing so had helped humanity find its place among the ancient powers of the galaxy, not as conquerors or supplicants, but as teachers of a truth that should never have been forgotten, that in the vastness of space, Among all the wonders and terrors that existence has to offer, nothing is more important than the connection between two beings who choose to care for each other. Nothing is more powerful than compassion freely given, and nothing is more revolutionary than the simple decision to see the suffering of another and say, without hesitation, I will help you. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. This was what made them remarkable among all the ancient species. Not their technology, not their strength, not their achievements, but their stubborn, persistent, irrational insistence that every life matters, that no one should suffer alone, and that even the smallest act of kindness can change the course of history. The story of Keiko Chen and Prince Aryan became a testament to this truth, preserved in monuments and memories, passed down through generations, and carried forward by every physician who ever placed a gentle hand on a patient and said, I'm here to help. Because that, in the end, is what it means to be human. Not perfect, not all-powerful, not ancient or wise beyond measure, just willing to care, ready to help, and brave enough to reach across the gulfs of difference to touch another being with kindness. And sometimes, that is enough to heal not just a prince, but an empire. Not just a patient, but a civilization. Not just one life, but countless lives across the endless stars. The cherry blossoms continued to fall, soft as snow, beautiful as hope, eternal as the simple truth that love and compassion are the most powerful forces in any universe.